One of the visions I have for L&D is to be more like the bee. The bee goes and pollinates different plants and finds these problems to solve. Because if we're still thinking, how do I create more content? We're thinking the wrong thing. We need to be thinking, how do I solve the most expensive problems? And how can I be one of those enablers? So going back to what we said with IT, they are needing to upskill people on technology. And L&D have a real opportunity to build that orchestration and how we can build this contextual AI upskilling in the workflow. And that's what's on my mind. I'm Harold, and this is my Curious Corner. Hey everyone, very nice to have such an esteemed panel with me today. Really excited to join this episode. Throughout this story arc, I've gone down through different rabbit holes, speaking to Lori Naus-Hoffman about where a learning system is going, spoken to Laura Michelle about how we can stay human as leaders in the age of AI, and also really dive deep with Ashwin into where learning systems are going. What I really wanted to do today is get to the practitioner side and what's happening on the ground. How are people using AI in their roles? So to do so, I have three great panelists. I have Hannah, who I met when she was at SJP and I joined their podcast. It feels like a nice homecoming. She's now at BAE Systems. I have Nicki, who's leading learning at SJP, as I said, was on the podcast. And I have Erica, who's one of the leading voices on AI and L&D and are doing lots of upskilling initiatives here. So got a really good sense of what's going on. So I'll go Hannah, Nicki, and Erica. How do you think the role of an L&D leader has changed in the last few years? And what feels different on day to day?
Yeah, great question. When I think about what's changed, I mean, being like really transparent, I've been in L&D for about 6 years. So I've not got like vast amount of experience, but in that time, I have seen a lot of change when it comes to like the speed of things. I think that biggest shift is like that decisions that once perhaps took a bit longer, like quarters, now just take weeks. So I think L&D leaders, we very much used to be probably a bit more like planners, but now we're very much orchestras of like continuous change, like how to day to day, like we need to manage this ambiguity. There's lots of change coming here. We need to make sure we're connecting learning to our business strategy, but in real time, not like setting a plan for our strategy for 2026, 2027. No, it needs to probably be more like agile and adaptable than those kind of longer term plans, I would say, because we need to navigate new tech, shape culture around adaptability, and just learn in real time, I'd say, is my answer to that, Harold.
What about yourself, Nicki? What are you seeing in your world is changing?
Agree with lots of things that Hannah said there. I think there's just so many more opportunities than ever to explore different ways of learning. And as you know, like we've been very much working closely with various different sort of suppliers, looking at immersive technology, bringing AI in. And we've been doing that for a few years into our academy, but also delivering that to the rest of the business now and doing that kind of exploration and test and learn. And I think there's that since lockdown, podcasts have exploded, obviously, since then. Users want more flexibility to learn. So there's much more of that kind of desire to learn on the go through podcasts and other kind of like means different ways of learning when you're walking the dog or you're on the train. And that wasn't really a thing before. It was much more around being in a classroom, being with a group or cohort together, which our academy was very much about before, has become much more flexible now. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but there's much less of that now. So 24/7 access to that content and that bite-sized learning. So that's really the big, way it's evolved for me over the last few years. We introduced our app 2021, I think, and giving people that access to that learning whenever they want it and giving them different options. I think that's the biggest thing, is that flexibility.
I think your perspective here, Erica, is really interesting from having the practitioner background and now upskilling L&D leaders on this. How are you seeing it from the consultancy facilitation side?
Definitely the tension between doing more with less, split with the decision of should we be doing more is the other question there, I would say. So when I was heading up L&D functions in corporate, I guess the plan was clearer. This probably ties more into what Hannah was saying as well in regards to that agility that's now needed. It's kind of things are changing a lot more now, but I think we need to kind of sit and think sometimes actually if we're getting this direction, or is it something we think we should be doing or something we actually are doing? Is it the right thing to do? I think it's all of that ambiguity that really influences and plays in the L&D leadership space, certainly with the clients that I'm working with. Certainly that also falls then into the consultancy lap as well, working with clients so closely. And, AI is hailed as the answer to doing more with less, but we all know that's not actually the right thing to do with this stuff. So the challenge that I'm trying to support my clients with, and what I'm hearing and seeing from those people that are doing the roles that I used to do, is I just don't know which way to turn, Erica. We're being told we need to roll out AI training and skills training, but is the business ready for that? It's just a whole bunch, a hodgepodge of those kind of questions at the moment.
And there's a real question here. What does being strategic in L&D mean in the AI era? So as an example, sometimes it's better to slow down solving the right problem and making sure we're delivering on that. It's very easy to chase shiny new toys and go at things because it's a bit of FOMO. Everyone's doing it. Everyone needs to use AI, but how do we use it strategically? So how have you seen this role of being strategic in L&D change in kind of the AI era?
In this fast-moving context, we really need to make sure that that strategy is kind of set to making sure we're not just marking our learners on what they're completing or everything else, but actually what are their behaviours, what they're doing differently to kind of meet those skills and the needs of the future as well. So there's a lot, and I think these expectations, certainly in just the time I've had in L&D, it's just constantly changing. And I think that's that thing, is that there's that phrase, the only constant is change. And I think that we need to make sure our strategies can also be a bit flexible as well, because we just don't know what's coming around the corner.
It's a very interesting landscape. So appreciate your insight there, Hannah. How are you seeing this in your world, Nicki?
You can still be strategic, but then be agile. So, delivering the business outcomes that you're looking for, but making sure that you can evolve and you've got the ability to, you might change direction slightly. And I think if I look at 5 years ago and the strategy, we had our 5-year strategy, I knew we were going to get there, but it's going to be a bit squiggly. I think I kind of, enjoy that sort of uncertainty, but also being really clear about what the outcomes we're looking for, what's the business strategy, being able to demonstrate actually what we're doing is having a positive impact on performance and on people's development as well. But what I love about what we've been able to do over the last 5 years is that you are working with people in the business and to be able to test and learn. So rather than throwing all the budget at it, agreeing what the overall kind of the scope is for a proposition, or some either new technology or new experiences or enhancing experiences, is being able to just dip your toe in, have a go, see what that feels like. Is it having the desired outcome? And even it might be something I'm really passionate about, it might not be right for business at the time. So having the ability to do that and be agile, but being really clear about the end goal, changing the way you might kind of get there, I think that's really important. And any sort of new capability, and then partnering with the right suppliers. So when we launched our app in 2021, it was so important to work with the right supplier. We worked with a company called Digital Balance. And if our roadmap does kind of flex and change, depending on what's needed, they put up with so much with us over the years, really, in terms of going back and forth around what those requirements are. But I think it's really important to be able to do that and have that trust in that relationship to be able to do it and then test a little bit. It's not working the way it should be. The experience isn't right. Going back and doing some more work. So you have to have that kind of test bed to be able to do it rather than go all in.
Erica, from your side, you mentioned this tension of doing more with less, but at the current speed we're at. How do you kind of seeing leaders trying to be strategic in this era?
There's a lot of we don't know what we don't know, particularly we all look to the C-suite or the SLT, don't we, in our organisations, and sometimes expect them to have all the answers. And now more than ever, I think there's a big question mark upon that, which plays into the change of that leadership capability and what a great leader looks like now. From a strategic learning perspective and what that looks like, we've got an opportunity here, and I write about this in my book, shameless plug, around with the leadership. The target operating model now for people professionals isn't just how do we stand up our HR or L&D function to be more strategic, do more with less, overcome that tension in learning or HR. Actually, the other hat that we have is how do we solve our stakeholder problems at the same time? And if we're really clever, we can combine that a little bit and solve our stakeholder problems, show them how to use AI at the same time, help them make more strategic decisions, and then use that as a use case or a test and learn in regards to what great learning strategy looks like in the age of AI. And that actually sounds probably more complicated than what it actually is. I was talking at World of Learning a couple of months ago, and I was sharing that, AI hasn't caused some of the problems around leadership and not solving the right problems and the tensions that we see now, but it's certainly shining a light on that stuff, perhaps to a degree that we'd never seen before. But, we've all been in organizations where perhaps we've not had the greatest relationships with stakeholders, and we're trying desperately to get them to engage in L&D and training plans and delivery and getting them to free up staff and all this kind of stuff. And the best thing I ever had was trying to sell an L&D to a claims director at an insurance company for about 18 months. And he didn't want to know because he did all of his training for his claims advisors. Nobody could add value in any other way until one day his printer broke down. This was back in the days when they sent out claims letters. And he came to me and asked, Erica, can I borrow your printer? And I said, absolutely, of course you can. Have it for as long as you want. And suddenly I had a stakeholder completely engaged in learning and development. So it just shows you sometimes we get very het up in, tensions around training and AI and this and that. Actually, sometimes it's just more of that human space of just go and solve like a really, niggly problem that somebody's got, AI or not AI, and then you go on the AI L&D journey with them. So there's ways of overcoming those tensions in a more relationship human way.
So on the topic of AI here, what's one area where AI has genuinely made your work easier and maybe one where it's made things more complicated? I'll start with you, Hannah.
Where it's made it easier would definitely be like accelerating that early stage thinking. So I would say when you're kind of got your initial ideas, your thoughts, maybe some kind of starting points from where you would like to kind of go and explore, and then using AI as like a thought partner in that and really helping you think about what are your options or some good talking points with some stakeholders you're mentioning. There's some like research summaries that you can just plug into AI and kind of get the output more quickly. So I think it's really enhanced that. I definitely use it on a daily basis for that purpose. Like if you've got some thoughts and ideas, using it as a thought partner and getting that, accelerating that early stage thinking. Where it's got more complicated would probably be that expectation management. I think there's that thing that lots of leaders, and we're all talking about how AI like improves speed and everything else, but actually, yeah, it might improve speed in the way that we do things, but it's not always in that quality, and that still requires us as like L&D leaders and also like that human touch where we need to apply our judgment, our critical thinking still. Is it the quality around it? And therefore, that doesn't always necessarily mean that AI like speeds things up. It might help us get to a place quicker, but it still then requires all the things we still need to do, applying our strategic hat, going out and testing it.
Our role is to really help people understand what it is, take away the fear. Sure, there's lots of people in lots of organisations that haven't, well, they think they've never used AI, but they are using it day to day and have been for quite a while in different elements of their lives. But, explains to them how to enhance what they're doing, but also, I think, especially for a highly regulated organisation like SJP, making sure we're protecting the business and being really clear about the sort of do's and don'ts without sort of being too militarian, and, helping people to understand those ways of delivering efficiency. And AI literacy, along with data literacy, is something that's really important. And I think we're at the very, very beginning of that journey, and it's getting that right and understanding which area of the business really need more focus, what AI tools they need would be different to, different team within my business. So that's a real focus for 2026 strategy. And again, I think, we talk a lot about peer learning, and that's something we've really been driving over the last few years at SJP. For me, having like facilitated workshops by experts in the business to say, either I'm from the AI team or I work in tech, talking to other people in the business, or just other people. So I've got a couple of people in my team that use it for content design. We've done a couple of show and tells just saying, well, you could use it in this way or that way, and more subtly helping people to introduce it into their daily lives. So I think that's what our role is at the moment. That's like really important.
It's interesting. It's made some things quicker, but doesn't mean the quality is always better. So there's lots of challenges going on there.
I'll talk very vulnerably and openly about this, actually. Someone who has fibromyalgia, runs a very busy small business and has to travel internationally quite a lot. If I didn't have AI to automate some of my business processes, to do parts of the job of a company director that I don't really like doing, like crunching the numbers and looking at spreadsheets and doing the research and scanning to see when the next opportunity is available, when can I apply for my next TEDx and things like that. All of that stuff is automated in my life. So for someone who's got fibromyalgia, like it allows me to actually do more of the job that I love doing. So put the energy that I do have into my clients and my consulting and my speaking, but also I can then rest more or spend time with my friends and family and the people that I love, or doing some crazy stuff. I just love slouching around on the sofa watching crappy B-class horror movies on Amazon, for example. So I can do more of that stuff. So I call it the AI dividend. We all have our own AI dividend, and that's my AI dividend, having fibro, but still being able to run a busy small business, still be able to do what I love doing, and still be able to watch B-class horror movies on Amazon. So I think what's making things more complicated, and it's coming up more and more when I'm working with clients or I'm delivering webinars or talks, I'm always getting now the question around sustainability, where people hear the negativity and the insight around what does this mean in terms of the energy that's used to cool data centers, particularly in parts of the States, the amount of water that's used as part of that, and actually when people start to see some of the figures, it really sticks in their throat a little bit. It's one of those things that it's so difficult when somebody brings up the sustainability thing, because we all know that there's a massive negativity around that. Zero-sum game isn't there yet in regards to making AI neutral in regards to the energy that we need to run it. But, being super geeky, we've got quantum computing on the horizon that will actually fix a lot of these problems and certainly reduce the amount of energy that we're using for AI. But more practically, it's about practical use of AI and building that into policies and strategies on a company by company basis, including that in your AI literacy, not to use AI for everything, not to make, crazy glibbly images about stuff all the time, and actually using AI for understanding, solving those problems, what you're going after, not just using it as a magic bullet for everything. So that's a really good conversation that people are having and asking questions about now. But it is a challenge in regards to the whole global warming piece, in regards to the amount of energy we are using with this technology.
The other thing that I'm seeing L&D teams doing, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, is flooding systems with subpar content. Just because you could do things quicker doesn't mean you should. So if you have an AI coach and the output is all okay, but not great content, they're not going to trust the output. So there's a real human connection to the AI creation where it needs to be fitted within that contextual context. So if we're going towards those agentic interfaces, the quality control and the role of L&D, like knowledge architects, are fine-tuning it to make it better. I think those are some things to keep in mind.
Just to add to that, Howard, sorry, it's I was running one of the autumn learning conferences, chairing that, and there was a great conversation that I was chairing with Zandy and Julie, I believe, from edX. It was talking a lot around AI, and a lot of what you were talking about there, with the sustainability side, but also Howard, what you were touching on. We can't forget that those human skills that are so imperative to our corporate ways of working and how we approach life, particularly kind of that critical thinking element. We can't just trust AI. We can't just take it and then just run with it. We need to apply our critical thinking hat still and actually utilize, like you said, in a way that fits the organization or the setting that you're exploring it in. And also it's that whole thing around this bias around it as well. We can then quite like the answers that chat or these kind of generative AI responses give us, and actually if we like it and we run with it, we're going to end up in all sorts of trouble. So I think it's applying critical thinking. I think that's where us as L&D, the focus we need to do are on those kind of skills. Think what skills do we need to be able to maintain kind of those more strategic critical thinking approaches when using AI. That's something we're definitely looking at BAE as well at the moment.
We just need to kind of take stock as a parent, as an employer, as L&D leaders, whatever that might say, and say, let's just kind of do a bit of an audit here in terms of what are people's mindsets? Can they use AI in the right way? What are they using it for? And are we giving people the right support from a critical thinking, a great prompting, understanding hallucinations, quality checking, whatever that might be? But we have that responsibility to put our arms around people, probably even more now than ever before.
And also, with such a reliance on there, there's been quite a lot of things I've seen on LinkedIn and articles where people have talked about cover letters for roles, and 95% of them send cover letter because they've gone into a tool that's then given them, and they haven't looked down to pick the fifth one. Everyone's gone with the first one. So it's that sort of danger that everyone becomes very similar to each other. You lose your personality that you're then sharing with the rest of the world, and also your personal brand at work. You try to build up potentially over many years, that then just becomes very similar to everybody else and quite bland. So I think there's a danger there we need to really focus on and be aware of.
We talked a little bit about being critical or discernment, the ability to judge well, and critical thinking. So as part of this, as L&D leaders, there's a lot of things I think we need to unlearn about how we used to operate and some of those practices. So curious from your perspective, what things are you trying to let go of as L&D leaders in the AI era?
The first thing that kind of springs to mind is very much a lot about what we've been talking about, is this kind of need to unlearn the instinct to wait for certainty. Now more than ever with technology, it's that rapid change. And I think L&D, we very much have a tradition of piloting into perfection. And I think that no longer exists now, or there's a need for that in the world that we live in, like that adaptability, being that agile. And actually, I love a pilot, and I'm not saying don't pilot. I think definitely pilot, but we don't need to wait for like perfection, and we don't need to have that kind of let's pilot tomorrow. We've got an idea, let's run with it, let's see what happens. And I think in the world we live in, it is that kind of that short cycles and those imperfect starts, and that shift from prove it works to sort of learn how it works. So I think we probably need to unlearn that.
I think we talked about it earlier, just around one size doesn't fit all. There's some stuff that we've been doing over the last couple of years, really focusing on neurodiversity, how we can help people to manage people with neurodiverse needs in the business, rather than just sort of management skills that you deliver and you expect everyone to kind of be able to manage people in different ways. People need different things. People are now putting their hand up to say, I'm dyslexic, or I'm much more open about it, because it's much more a conversation people are having a lot more now, and they're not ashamed of saying that I'm neurodiverse. It's almost turning everything on its head and being able to look at things in a completely different way, personally as individuals, but also for us to be able to offer that to other people. So to me, that's something I really want to focus on, and there's great opportunity there. So, and that's kind of experimentation we talked about, is letting them be part of that experiment. If people want to, obviously, some people might not want to, but just having those options available depending on how you want to learn, what you want to learn, and when. It's just that more flexibility. So that's probably the most important thing for me at the moment. I'm really interested in.
What are you unlearning currently, Erica, or what are you seeing some of your clients are unlearning in this era?
I think it's just a core learning agility conversation that ties in with the critical thinking need, right? So like, too long have we relied upon our power coming from deep knowledge and our resources being made available to us. A good example of this is within universities and colleges, where you've got professors and lecturers, for example, that are absolute experts in certain elements of vocations or skills or knowledge or, whatever it might be. But actually, the fact that large language models have now democratized a lot of this information, they're having to kind of put down the skills and the knowledge that don't serve them as they did traditionally, and now go, gosh, actually, I need to move from being an expert, a deep knowledge expert as a professor in my subject, to actually being comfortable to still be a knowledge expert, but facilitate an interactive session as my lecture, where my students can go onto ChatGPT, learn the content from the right signposted ways with the right prompts, and then challenge me on their understanding of that. And I then consolidate and facilitate the learning experience. That's why education and learning is probably one of the most disrupted sectors at the moment. So it's how do we kind of stop associating our knowledge and power with our ego and our identity and all of these things, which is going to be really difficult for some people. And how do we pick up new skills and knowledge and apply that in record time, which might feel very alien because I've never been asked to do that before. So I think, again, this isn't something that AI is causing a problem about, but it's certainly shining a light in terms of, the new world of work. Even in 22, the World Economic Forum said 66% of, I think, 8 to 11-year-olds were going to go into a job that didn't even exist yet. So we have to have that kind of cognitive flexibility, rely on our neurodivergent friends, which I am one as well also, and our agility that Hannah talks about in terms of how we operate in that way. It really goes down, like anything, right? It goes down to mindset, and that's a very L&D thing to say, but it really does. You could have the best prompts in the world, the best tools in the world, the best machine learning in the world, but if people can't understand what that means to them and then take a step forwards in regards to what does that mean to them going forwards, then I think we're kind of stuck before we put a foot over the starting line. So that learning agility thing is so understated, but so very important in every sector, I think.
Just interesting point you're saying there about kind of, lots of things changing in education. And I just really also talking about some of those AI tools. My son was told only a few months ago that they weren't allowed to use those, any type of platform, to do their homework, which I thought was kind of really unfair because they're still doing the research. It's just speeding that process up, I guess, but they are now allowed to use it. You're still doing the work. It's just being delivered in a slightly different way, and it's, bringing lots of efficiency.
And we have to challenge the systems, not the people using the tools. And Nicki, to your point about the CV earlier, I would argue that's the fault of the recruiters, because they should be assessing in a ways the opportunities to get to know those individuals as people, not just the fact that they're just, scanning a cover letter or a CV or something like that. It's the assessment that's wrong. One of the pieces of research when I was writing the talent acquisition recruitment chapter in the book around AI for people professionals was some of the good but simple practice where people have just it's called an AI transparency statement. So when you put a job out and the application stages, the statement says from the employer, it's okay for you to use AI. We expect you to use it. But just to let you know, this is what we're going to be asking you about. It's going to be about your experience and what the examples that you've put in your letter or your CV or your application. We're not really going to be looking at your CV. We want you to talk about this. And that's the bit that you can't hide behind. And I thought that was really clever when I saw that, because it's almost taking away that kind of, can I use AI? Am I cheating? Am I not cheating? Or I'm just going to use AI to put a CV in. It'll be fine. Nobody knows. Gets rid of that whole conversation. And that's where we need to be clever with this stuff, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, that's quite interesting because when I was looking for like my next opportunity, SAP, so I went through a couple of like job interviews and things like that. In one of them, they gave you like a task activity, and then they gave you half an hour to go and do it. And they were very much encouraging, like, go and use AI tools. Like we expect you to go and use it. We want to see what the output is that you get from putting this kind of thing into an AI tool. And I just thought that was really refreshing because it was like you didn't, like you said, you don't have Erica like around. Can I? Can't I? It comes back to that whole like critical thinking, like I am going to go use it, then what do I do with it next?
And again, if you're a seasoned user of that platform and you're using that to do a cover letter for a role, it's got a lot of information about you already that it can bring to life. So, who's to say that's not a really good, accurate reflection of you and how you might fit into that business?
There are several things I think unlearning would be helpful. I think the sentiment, what got us here will get us there in the future, I think needs to be unlearned. How people want to learn, and you touch on it, one size doesn't fit all, Nicki. I think that needs to be unlearned. There's too much push and not enough pull. So I'm more for building out conversational knowledge coaches and seeing that knowledge architect and using AI to help get content there, but using our contextual awareness to bring it into the coaching interfaces to make those more helpful. The other thing which I would say, which is very much on the vendors, is I'm very keen for us to unlearn the shiny new toys and that there's quick answers to a lot of the problems. From an L&D perspective, there's systemic areas where you need to deliver business value, but you're chasing shiny toys to try to get you there. So from a vendor perspective, less marketing spiel and more deep understanding and deep discourse about the issues that we want to solve. So if you go to the doctor, I would someone to look at me holistically of what I would need, not give me a sugar pill because they think I have a problem. So throwing AI and skills and all of these things at problems before we understand them, I think it's something that vendors need to unlearn, but also L&D teams need to spot that and say, hey, throwing 50 courses at this problem may not solve it, but actually doing contextual learning at the point of need will do. Fun discussions there on what to unlearn. A very interesting question here is, how do you balance curiosity and credibility, which goes to a little bit of what I was saying here, staying open to new tools, but maintaining a point of view that earns trust. So I'll start with you, Hannah.
I definitely think being curious and going out and like testing these new tools and like getting a feel for what they can do, I would think, and being open to thinking about where they can make your kind of day-to-day easier, like moving those inefficiencies. But with the credibility piece is what you were just saying, like asking yourself, like, would this solve a real problem that we have? Like, does it elevate that human capability that we're looking to kind of build? And it's definitely going out and figuring out the problem, but being aware of that curious point of like what's going on out there, what like keeping up to speed with like the new technology advancements, the new kind of data and a new piece of research that are coming out, but then going away and like thinking, does this work for the business that I'm in? So kind of like balancing the two there. But it's tricky, right? Because it's easy to get excited about these new tools. But I think that's also where I work. BA is obviously such a, like, it's 120,000 people globally. Like, it's huge. So like that's also where sometimes IT and like the security and those things come to help you out a little bit, because you can get really excited, but actually like to actually get them into a business, the procurement process can take so long that actually, and also you've got to build a business case, right? So you have to really prove that it's going to solve a problem. So that sometimes does help as well.
Yeah, and the shiny new tools that might be available this week or this month might not be the right ones for the business. And that's that kind of thing about someone remains to be agile or still having that strategy in place that we talked about earlier. And you've got to think about what that experience is for people in your business. They have to have that confidence in you that you are thinking further ahead, that you aren't just jumping on the next thing because it's happening in the market and we feel like we want to compete with other people in our industry or kind of cross industry as well. Everyone's got their day job to do as well, and their own strategy need to deliver to ladder up to the business strategy, and to keep throwing new things. Or there's, anything that we do, we want to make sure it's integrated into our house platform, which is our app, our learning app. But to do that, as Hannah said, you're onboarding people, but so it's finding people in the business that you can do that test and learn. They go, right, is this right? Test it for a while, and then it's something you integrate in, rather than saying, can you log into a different system? Can you do this? Can you, using these different tools? People just get exacerbated with, all of this, and they lose patience and they lose confidence in the L&D function, that we are just kind of going out there and just doing this all the time, which, it can be very tempting.
Of course. How are you seeing that from your perspective, Erica? There's a real kind of struggle there, exciting new things, but maintaining that credibility. So it's where experimentation and stakeholder management meet. So how are you finding that your clients are working through these things?
It's a lot around the kind of what we find, particularly with that kind of first line, second line, team leader, middle manager space as well, is they get the buy-in and the curiosity because you facilitate a learning experience that makes your personal life easier using AI, not just your work life, because work life already has the tension, like, why are you telling me to use a tool which the narrative around that and the media and the socials and the doom scrolling are telling me is going to take my job? What the hell's in it for me to do that? Why would I even think about that? Don't be silly. But if you go from the human first perspective rather than the AI first perspective, you've got people looking at, to your point, holistically, Harold, around like, if I can make my home life easier, if I can keep the kids busy with something that I've generated with AI, like a treasure hunt for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon when it's tipping it down with rain, I can get a bit of work done, or I can get myself in the headspace for that important meeting on a Monday, or, so we're so interlinked now in that space. So I think one drives the other in terms of curiosity and credibility. I guess my other take on that is I get approached quite a lot from startups in particular that have created, they've wrapped a skin effectively around ChatGPT or something like that, and it's being pitched as the new learning coach or the best content creator or this, that, and they've trained an element of the model and it looks great and all the rest of it, whether that's video avatar or whether that's kind of text role play and content curation. I literally have had 3 calls recently where providers have gone, let me demonstrate this to you. What do you think? And what would your clients think? And my response to all 3 of them has been, are you getting any pushback in regards to this versus their in-house large language model like ChatGPT or Copilot? And they say, funny you say that, Erica. That's exactly the, objection that we've got right now. And I'm like, because you're not solving a problem. You're just wrapping it in a different bow. Let's just be more human with this whole conversation. And that brings curiosity and credibility then.
Just going on a bit of my vendor tantrum. So imagine throughout the 90s and 2000s, doctors in the US was told, oh, everyone could use a pain medication. Everyone could use a pain pill. It's an easy problem. So you're just providing the solution. You're part of the supply chain, but you're effectively part of the problem because you're not solving it. You're just making it seem like you can solve it. So why does a change project fail from a talent director's perspective? Because they're being sold a fallacy that doesn't understand the problem intrinsically and holistically, and they're thinking that's going to solve the problem. So much more very deep discourse and understanding what we want to solve. I guess what's the real problem rather than throw an AI wrapper on a virtual coach or a skills agent here without actually understanding what we're solving for. And what you mentioned as well, Hannah, is there's a curiosity on the market, but what's going to work for my business? I think that's a really important distinction. And talked about discernment, the ability to judge well. This is going on in the market, and the market may be here, but we're here. So I need to start here and then move along that journey. Like, what's going to work for us, stakeholder management, understanding business strategy, beating the performance enablers. I think that's kind of where I see those things. So interesting question. And we're trying to do some reflection a little bit on the topic here. If you could give one piece of advice, Hannah, to someone who's starting to integrate AI into their L&D role, whether they're in-house or whether a consultant, what would that advice be?
If you're just starting to integrate AI into learning, perhaps I'd say start probably with tasks rather than transformation. So start small. I think you could find one workflow or process that AI could lighten a bit of what you were talking around, Erica, saying being so open about it, but how it can relieve some of the tasks that people don't necessarily have time for, and actually learn from that. And I think you can start then to explore how you could then perhaps take it wide, more largely. So momentum comes very much from those small wins rather than going out some massive grand strategy. So I think if you're very just starting to look, then I would say have a look at the tasks that you do on day to day and think, where could AI make this easier?
For me, I would say, and it kind of goes with the theme about that social learning element and that relying on kind of your peers, is talk to people, or it doesn't have to be at work, and be anybody around your friends, family, but actually say, are you using it? What are you using it for? Which bits work, which don't? And then go and give it a go. So you've got a bit of kind of confidence that someone else has tried it first. People want to learn more about certain things in the business, and AI will be one of those, and what those tools are, and getting people in, and people, trust their colleagues, that it becomes less scary. So I think that's where I'd start.
This is your wheelhouse, Erica, and what you do in your workshop and facilitation. So curious to get your angle here.
Absolutely. And from a leadership perspective or a people professional perspective, I'm going to bring together what Hannah and Nicki both said then, is it's around the quick wins, but making the quick wins visible. So not just kind of doing it in your silos as L&D or HR or whatever it might be, and we all pat ourselves on the back and then we go and deliver a course again. It's actually being really strategic in the transactional. So have that kind of mini comms plan ready to go that says, this was the task, to Hannah's point, that we chose. This was the trial. This was the test and learn. This was the output. And what's the benefit? Not just the fact of that. So become great storytellers in visible quick wins. That's how you get people on board. And that's one of the biggest pieces of advice that I'll say. Of course, literacy, confidence, all of the stuff we've talked about on this call is fundamental and almost foundational to all of that. But those visible quick wins, that's how you get all of the stakeholders, like my stakeholder at LV that came sniffing around wanting to solve his problem about the printer. You'll get all your stakeholders sniffing around going, I saw the email that you got a 10% increase in productivity, or actually you didn't need to increase your budget for headcount, or you've got an increase NPS based on what you did here and here. Who doesn't want that kind of publicity in their organization, right? Visible quick wins.
We have in BAE an internal system of continuous improvement where you go and kind of submit something that you might have found in your area in a day-to-day, to your point, Erica, about don't do it in silos and share. And actually you can go and you can submit on a board that's public to the whole business, something that you've just found out that's helped you to kind of become quicker in your role, or it's helped you with efficiencies. And I thought that was really great because it's, to your point, don't do it alone, share what you know, and then with that comms piece, because that will help the business get faster. You can't just do it alone.
And that when we're facilitating workshops, prompting workshops, clarifying question workshops, all that stuff that, it doesn't matter what the large language model is, the skill of that stuff, I push really hard on any group. I could have 20 C-suite in the room. I could have 50 frontline agents on a webinar. I will push for sharing either in the chat, on the mic, in the room, because that's where the real richness comes from. And off the back of that, there'll always be someone saying something like, we should capture all these great prompts, or we should capture all these great outputs, or Tell you what, go and build a prompt library. Go and somebody get all this, download the chat and get it down somewhere like that. This is the real gold. This is where mining for the beauty here. And that's why that kind of experience running those sessions with a consultancy or training company or in-house or however you're doing it has to be practical. That has to be that light bulb moment, that sharing, that use cases, Nicki, that you said, that contextuality. What does it mean for me in my role? I've had that light bulb moment, because then I feel like I own it. Then I feel I can go and innovate and do something different. All these great words that we all talk about sometimes in L&D and leadership, but we don't always see it. So it's just fundamental, really.
I think from my side, what we talked about, be clear in the problem you're trying to solve and the direction you want to go. AI is a tool in your toolbox. It might be the right tool or it might not be the right tool depending on the context. And the second thing is kind of that curiosity and experimentation, but mixing that with where do we actually want to go? Something that does excite me a lot about AI is the possibility to remove some of the grunt work that L&D have been stuck with. So you said initially there, Eric, about running your business. It crunches the numbers. It takes some of that heavy lifting off. So think of L&D teams or admins who might be able to alleviate some of that by having agents do some of that work that is not high impact and value. And they can spend time doing facilitation, really human work to a better degree. So that's a future I'm really passionate about, reducing that admin load and then being more human in the age of AI. So as a final question here, I'm curious, what excites you about the ability to be more human with AI here?
You wrote a brilliant article recently, Harold, in your Harold's Curious Corner around how AI is everywhere, but that human capability remains a competitive advantage. I truly believe in that. And you've got the quote that you use in the article where it's like, AI helps us teach faster, but only humans help people grow. I think that if we can shift the focus at L&D, very much focus on teaching people how to work with AI tools, but then focusing on building out those soft skills that AI can't replicate, like that human connection, those critical thinking we were talking about, like collaboration. And I think just turning the handle and focusing on that, I'm very excited by, because AI can remove those really annoying, grunty tasks that you were just mentioning, Harold. And instead, we can get our learning from interaction and collaboration and creativity, which AI can't always do.
Appreciate the plug as well. What are you seeing in your world, and what excites you here, Nicki?
I think very similar to Hannah, and I agree. I just feel like we've been through a massive process of change at SJP. It's been really intense. Just having those days where, I feel like it's been a long time since I've done that, where you're going in and having those kind of, innovation workshops or days, or just thinking about the future and strategy and spending time to focus on that, not getting dragged away, And I think that's where AI is going to come in and be able to help us to do that, and be more efficient and be more choosy about our time, but also that kind of thinking time that I just don't feel like I've got very much of over the last few months. And I need to make time to do that. And I think AI is, those tools that are there, if you're more structured about it and go, right, I'm going to use these things for that, to give me more of that time back so that I can then spend more time with my team and other people. That's the big thing to me that I feel like that's going to be part of my objectives 2026.
You mentioned some of this, Erica, with running your own business and using AI to do the heavy lifting. So curious, what excites you about this? Is it more running your business, or how do you see L&D teams being able to be more strategic?
I think both, and all of the above of what's been mentioned. There's been some fantastic points that have been raised in this conversation. The interesting thing for me is been the sectors that I've seen, or the L&D teams in certain sectors that I've seen really start to embrace AI from that human perspective that might have more kind of financial challenges than a typical corporate. So the third sector, the charity sector, particularly L&D teams in those areas, I've really seen them step up and start to think about how they can go back to more with less, or what does AI mean for us in terms of how we deliver more to our charities and our, these guys don't have big pots of cash. They rely on volunteers quite a lot to deliver quite a lot of their strategic objectives. And often charities have, a strategy around making people's lives better and things like that. So I'm starting to see the 3 or 4 charities that I've either worked with or I just engage with the L&D leaders because they're just fantastic people. The way they're talking about using this technology is so human-like, and they always think about, the person they're helping who benefits from that charity, and they connect AI L&D through that strategy to the end user, for want of a better phrase. this is where the real impact is. How do we help people that live on the streets, or, people who have health concerns, or people who have terminal cancer, or, whatever might be that kind of charity's focus? There's a real clear line of benefit sight there. And that's really inspirational for me.
Yeah, having the ability to actually drive impact, whether that's in our organization or to wider society, that's definitely a great point with AI. So we'll round off the episode. I'll just encourage anyone listening to this to connect with Erica on upskilling and delivering a lot of these great programs. Check out the Every Day's a School Day podcast with Nicki, and connect with Nicki and Hannah as well, who've wrote and done lots of interesting things with learning technologies from those perspectives. So find inspirational peers, find others, and we're all sharing the same reality. We're trying to make sense of what's going on. It's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to be figuring things out. There's so much perfection and everyone's nailed things. We're all just trying to do what's best for our organization. So we're all doing our best and trying to do those things. So thank you very much, Erica, Nicki, and Hannah, for joining the conversation here. So that's it for this conversation. I'm going to keep going down rabbit holes as we explore the weird and wonderful world of learning and development. If you want my full wrap up and takeaways, subscribe to my newsletter where I'll connect all the dots.